Hello everyone! As you all know, I've really spent a lot of time with Cyberpunk and loved the game thoroughly despite some minor complaints. I've been impatiently waiting, as I'm sure most of you have been too, for some kind of major update. A story update, a companion update, heck, even just a solid expansion or DLC with some meat on it. While there have been lots of rumors floating around on release dates for these big content drops, it looks like we now finally have some pretty solid information about what the expansion or expansions will contain. I wasn't even planning to do a video on this, but after finding out about the leak, downloading the files, and spending the majority of my afternoon combing through them, which, as you all know, is something I don't normally do because I hate spoilers, but in this case, I have been so starved for new Cyberpunk content and information that I just had to find out what it was all about. I had to see for myself. I then went back and forth on how much I should tell people about what I found. Most people probably still want to see it for themselves. I decided that I'd give a brief summary and then a spoiler cutoff where you can either proceed with caution or just wait until the content is released. Also, according to what other people like Juicehead, who by the way is an awesome YouTuber for Cyberpunk info, definitely check him out if you're looking for consistent Cyberpunk news. But anyway, he said that apparently there was a big dump file back during patch 1.5. I can't recall if it was in the Steam Depot or what, but I guess there was a modding group that found it. And I don't know the details of what happened and won't claim to, but apparently they were trying to get CDPR to take it down so it wouldn't ruin the release. And something happened that caused the modding group to instead dump the information publicly. I really have no idea how you go from wanting to protect the public from the leaks to dumping them yourself, but whatever, I wasn't there, so I don't know. But the zip file was released by these modders, and then it was deleted with a takedown notice, but you can still find it for now if you look hard enough. And honestly, I'm not sure how safe it is to discuss these topics in detail, so I'm not going to get too deep. But the reality is that any publicity is good publicity, so part of me wonders if they didn't do this on purpose for the attention. I mean, it works. It gets people excited and talking about the game, which is great for Cyberpunk 2077. All of that aside, let's get to the actual files and what it might mean for future expansions. I'm going to tell you guys that most all of the files that were dumped are text files for dialogue. There are some other basic scripts that launch cinemas or allow the player to select options in the game, but most of them are just dialogue. It's written in Polish, and so most of it needs to be translated. So what's in it? Without going into spoiler territory, at least. There is one folder that breaks down 2 full quest lines. It might even be one major quest line with additional content added onto it, but it's hard to tell because they seem related, but yeah, it's complicated and confusing to go through these files. So one sounds like a new ending, or a path to a new ending. The other quest line seems to revolve around a new zone, and it seems like even the line that gets you to that new ending kind of brings you to that zone too. Aside from that, there is another folder called Open World, which I have to assume is new content for the open world. Pretty self-explanatory there. There's new fixer dialogue, which may mean new fixer quests. There are a bunch of other folders that are titled mini world stories, scene, and world encounters, most of which don't have much in terms of content I can read. The Street Stories folder, however, is jam-packed with dialogue. I mean, there are a ton of files to go through here, and most of them are labeled with a pre-brief and a debrief, and given some of the files talk about an interrogation room, it makes me wonder if it might actually have something to do with working with the police, or detectives, or something like that, which is an interesting possibility, especially for me, because I love detective work. I mean, that's part of why I got so into going through this folder in the first place. So let's see, there are also some names mentioned that lead me to believe that there are new fixer quests in here as well, or possibly something that has to do with investigating them. It's hard to say honestly, but everything I read in the titles reeks of cop lingo, or undercover lingo anyway. There is even one file that talks about an informer deal, so that's my guess. There's the safe description of what's in the files, without going into huge detail. Now I might make another video at a later time depending on the response this one gets, going into it in more detail, or I might just wait for the expansion. The one thing that I really couldn't help but dive further into though was the new potential ending. So at this point, click off if you don't want to hear what I have to say about it. Now, Can you imagine a new ending to Cyberpunk 2077, one where V isn't fated to fade away? I've complained a lot about the lack of good endings in Cyberpunk. I feel like every good RPG should give you the choice to change things. Sure, there are bound to be pitfalls. The Dark Ritual with Morrigan comes to mind immediately, but it still allowed you to save everyone in the end. That's what Cyberpunk was missing for me. I hate that V dies no matter what you do. So it makes total sense why I was so enthralled by the idea of a new ending. From what I can tell, it looks like they piggybacked this ending onto the existing Devil ending, which is pretty interesting in and of itself. Now, since a lot of this is cinema or calls cinema scenes in the script, it's hard to know exactly what it's calling by the commands, but the dialogue helps to solve the puzzle. So in the quest folder, there is a series of new folders all starting with Q. Q301, Q302, up to Q307. So the first file in the first folder gives you an introduction. It's a dialogue of a holocall, a woman talking to V, and they say, V, you don't know me, but I know you, and I have a job for you. I know who you are, I know your problems, I can help you, and only you can help me. There are a ton of responses that V can give here, and they all lead to this combat zone. That is alluded to further in the other folders that all start with MQ. And this is what I was talking about earlier too in the non-spoiler section. It seems like there's the new zone, the combat zone, and there are a bunch of quests and dialogues that all revolve around this area. And then this character wants you to go to the combat zone. So it's kind of like, the hook. It gets really weird really fast because something happens next where V talks about their head being screwed in a vice. And then Johnny says something about her playing for time, that she's hacking you. And this is, of course, how we know that it's a woman. Apparently, she can get into the relic in V's head, and she might even be able to override Johnny because there's another line where V talks about putting Johnny back on. The mysterious woman finally introduces herself as the Songbird and says that she's a living netrunner. She apparently has the ability to disable Johnny temporarily, otherwise V gets a nasty shock when they're both trying to occupy the same space. Now, I'm sure that probably has you hooked, because it had me hooked, and maybe I'll dive into more later, but for now, I'm going to get to the part that proves this has a new ending included within. If you go to the last folder, Q307, you can find a bunch of files that are all important scenes for the ending of the game, specifically the Devil ending. You can see Mikoshi, the rooftop, all of the extra scenes in the Devil ending, the dream, the rehab with that stupid cube, and the operation. So I believe after reading through all of this, that this new Songbird ending will piggyback off the Devil ending, and there's a lot of dialogue that talks about having to work with Hanako, just like you would have in the Devil ending. And there's also talk with Johnny during the Mikoshi scene where V says that they did this so they could use the Songbird chip to save their life. I guarantee you that there is more in the other folders, dialogue-wise, to really explain the whole thing, but for now at least, I wanted to leave something available for myself to experience later. I am super excited that CDPR was open to the idea of a new ending, though. I think the game needed a good ending, or at least a better ending, and really, how are they going to have any more expansions if V doesn't survive? I mean, I guess it's possible that one expansion could have been finding the cure, and maybe that's exactly what this new ending is. So, what do you guys think? This is probably the most information I've seen drop in the entirety of the time I've been following the game. Every time I see a new video that talks about new DLC, it never has any real information. Nothing that shows they're going to continue the story in any way. Considering it's been so long, I was really worried that we just weren't going to get anything. So this makes me really excited. Now, this could have been the perfect opportunity for them to add in a bonus Takamura romance scene to the Devil ending too. Maybe I'll have to keep digging through those files to see if there's anything else mentioned. If you guys liked the video, please consider sharing it so more people can see it, or even giving a super thanks below. Joining my Patreon is a great way to show support too and get a bunch of nice extra content to go with it. You can pledge whatever amount you can, even $1 really helps. Okay guys, have a good weekend and I'll see y'all later.